We talked a little bit about it as we were kind of filling out that document of advantages and disadvantages of MRI. You guys noted that it is not ionizing radiation, but non-ionizing radiation, which is good because it doesn't really have any biological harm to our patients. The only thing that could cause potential harm, biological wise, is heating. So our SAR limits are controlled by our FDA. So FDA actually usually is in cahoots with the IEC, and they're coming up with plans and guidelines to make sure that patients stay safe within the MRI environment. But we know that there's no biological concerns, but there is an issue of heating, but there's also an issue of tympanic membrane rupture, where if the machine gets too loud, you can actually injure some of those tympanic membranes within the inner ear. So we need to make sure that the pulse sequences, if we do utilize, like, say, a diffusion scan or a echoplanar imaging. I know these kind of foreign terms to you, but they're very loud pulse sequences. And you guys might have noticed that when you were observing that some pulse sequences were a lot louder than others. Did you guys notice that a little bit? Like, some places have really good noise restriction, like the glass that separating the barrier of the text and the scanner is really good material, and it actually reduces the noise in the control area. But some places, they don't have that luxury, and it gets really loud in the work area in zone 3. But you'll notice as you get more and more experience that some pulse sequences are a lot louder than the others, and that's usually because of the gradient switching on and off very rapidly, causing the room air to compress and move. And it could be potentially dangerous for a patient who's in the actual scanner. So what do we usually require when we put the patient in the scanner? What do we usually give them?
The
So
clicker
that headphones.
So we give them a squeeze ball to notify if anything's going wrong. But what about in terms of tympanic membrane rupture?
Yes.
We give them ear protection.
Ear protection. And what are the two types we normally give them?
Earplug and headphones.
Good, good. So usually you can either give either or you can give both. Typically, if you're doing something that requires some kind of instruction, you want to give the headphones so that you could talk to the patient throughout the procedure. And then the other accrediting body here is our ACR, made up of our radiologists, and they're the ones that have created the white pages, safety guidelines, things like that over the years. And they have changed and been updated constantly since a tragic event happened in 2001. So that's what kind of stirred a lot of people and kind of really raised some concerns to the MRI environment, was this tragic accident that happened in 2001. But this was a hospital in the New York area. I don't know exactly what hospital it was, but a boy that was 6 years old was getting a brain scan and was in the center of the magnet, which is called isocenter, within the bore of the magnet. And it was a superconducting magnet, so that means the magnet is always on. So you always have to be worried about projectiles, devices, other things like that could potentially harm the patient. And this particular boy had their oxygen saturation levels started to really drop rapidly. So the nurse that was caring for the patient at the time quickly rushed out of zone 4, the MRI suite, to grab, what do you think she went to go grab, or he went to go grab?
The oxygen tank.
Oxygen tank. And not all oxygen tanks are non-ferrous, meaning they are safe to go into zone 4. So this particular oxygen tank probably connected to the bed that they transported him down. She got to about the doorway of the MRI scan room, and then the magnetic strength steadily increases exponentially as you get closer and closer to that magnet. And as she was rushing in to care for the patient because she saw the oxygen dropping and give them oxygen. Unfortunately, that ferromagnetic properties of that oxygen tank attracted it to the isocenter of the magnet, slipped out of her hands. That magnetic strength became too much for her to hold on to that oxygen tank. It turned into a projectile, and anytime that happens, it goes to the bore of the magnet. And what was at the center of the magnet? What part of the body? The head, yeah. They were scanning the patient's brain, and unfortunately, the patient did not survive because the oxygen tank hit the patient right in the head and caused irreparable damage. So this really opened a lot of people's minds to some of the safety concerns and things that we need to really be aware of in the MRI environment to prevent another incident like this from ever happening again. So the ACR, which is the American College of Radiology, they came up with these white pages right after this incident happened. And these white pages have been updated periodically ever since, as they gain more knowledge, as the MRI environments change and adapt. So I actually posted the ACR manual on MR safety here. And it's one of your homework assignments. It's a long document. I don't expect you to read it all, but what I want you to do is skim through it just to kind of see what the headlines are. And you can see here what they hit on. So if you guys ever have a question about that, and maybe like it was some gray area as I was talking about in a lecture, you could always refer to this ACR manual on MRI safety. So definitely skim through this document, read through it if you have the time, but it's about 60 pages, but very in-depth, very informative on what to do in the MRI environment, not only for a technologist, but for a visitor, for front desk staff, for MD. So you have to be considerate that you're going to have all different types of people enter your MRI environment, and you need to know what to do because you are the one that is in control of that environment. I also put on here some safety websites that you guys need to be familiar with. So I want you guys to check out these 5 websites and just kind of peruse them, just kind of see what they're all about. The top one here is MRI Safety. This is Dr. Frank Shellick. He's a big MRI safety guru, but he created this website. And the biggest thing that came from this website is this little tab over here called the list, because he has compiled a list of MRI conditional devices. And conditional devices mean you have to abide by certain types of conditions to scan those particular devices. He also put on there MRI safe and MRI unsafe devices to quickly rule those in or out. But the main reason is those MRI conditional devices. Here is the ACR link, which is where you can find that manual, but there's other good quality documents on there. Here is the Institute for Magnetic Resonance Safety Education and Research. MRI Comp, another kind of device website. These last two are kind of a good source for devices. This last one is actually created by MRI technologists. So this is a doctor created this list, but then Mag Resource actually was created by an MRI technologist, because sometimes there's a lot more that goes into just instead of just going to that website, seeing that it's conditional, and then boom, you're done. You can scan them. You have to find all the specifications of your scanner that correspond with the manufacturer's guidelines. So the MRI tech created a good website. So these are the objectives we'll talk about today. We'll try and get through as many before 12 o'clock as we can. But we're going to talk about definitions, and we're going to discuss more safety zones. We're going to talk about the personnel who work in the MRI environment, non-MRI personnel, level 1, level 2. We'll talk about device terminology. We kind of already hit on that. MRI safe, MRI conditional, MRI unsafe. And then we'll examine the biological effects a patient is subjected to in the MRI environment. So you're going to have 3 different magnetic fields that every patient is going to interact with in the MRI environment. That is one thing that a lot of people do not realize. There's 3 magnetic fields that could possibly cause some danger or harm to our patient. And they are the RF or radio frequency field, time varying magnetic field. Another term for that is called gradient magnetic fields. So your gradient switching on and off. Your static magnetic field, which is denoted by B sub 0 sometimes. And we'll talk about that in physics, what this B sub 0 means. Static magnetic field. So those are the three that you interact with, or the patient interacts with when they come into zone 4. And then we'll talk about cryogen safety. So in every hospital that you're going to be working at, you're going to be dealing with what we call a superconducting magnet, meaning there is no resistance on the coils. It's been ramped up. They quench it off. It's a 1.5 Tesla or a 3 Tesla magnet. They do not need any more power source once it's ramped up, because all those coils within that magnet are cooled down by liquid helium. That's what those cryogens are, liquid helium that surround those coils within the MR system. And those gases that turn into a liquid could be very dangerous if they're released within the room or not evaporated out into the environment when you have a quench of a magnet. And we'll talk about what a quench is. But cryogens could either be liquid helium, or sometimes they are surrounded by liquid nitrogen. So those are what cryogens are. It's where a gas has been turned into a liquid. So very, very cold helium or nitrogen. So the following definitions relate to the layout of the MRI environment. So we'll talk about zones 1 through 4, the personnel who work in this environment, non-MRI personnel, level 1 and level 2, and then the devices, safe, conditional, and unsafe. So let's talk about our zones. So the ACR created these zones to let everybody, the general public, hospital staff, MRI staff, know where they are in a particular zone when they enter that zone. So you could be anywhere within the hospital, and typically you're in zone 1. So it's not usually marked that well. You might see a zone 1 sign somewhere, but zone 1 is usually not marked because that's denoted for the general public. There's no MRI safety concerns there because it's usually just people walking through the halls, things like that. So you're not going to see much signage in zone 1. But the ACR has defined 4 safety zones within MRI facilities, and they are zones 1 through 4, corresponding to increasing magnetic field exposure. So as you go from zone 1 to zone 2 to zone 3 to finally into the actual scanning room, you are steadily going to be increasing your magnetic field exposure and hence potential safety concerns. So we really need to be concerned with who's coming into zone 3 and 4. Zone 1 and 2, just general population, usually the waiting room, zone 2. But man, we really need to regulate who comes into zone 3 and zone 4. So here's just another breakdown, kind of in a visual representation of the different zones. So here we have zone 1, outpatient entrance. So basically anywhere in the hospital. And then zone 2, once you finally get back to that MRI department and you check in with the front desk at the MRI department, you are technically in zone 2. Usually there's a reception area. They'll have a toilet or a bathroom for the patient to go to the bathroom. They'll have a changing room so that you can put all your valuables in a locker, things like that. Because you need to, remember, you need to take off all metal. You need to change into a gown. You should not be wearing yoga pants. You should not be wearing a sports bra. These things patients will try and get away with, but you need to get them into a gown because there are potential hazards with yoga pants. Especially, I talked about this, I think, with you guys when you were juniors. A lot of the material that they're making yoga pants out of has a silver textile in it. So it's usually microbial, so it's antibacterial, so that you don't get a smell on the fabric. but that could be potentially cause a burn to the patient. So you need to be knowledgeable of what that material is made out of if you happen to put them on the scanner with their yoga pants still on, or shirt, or whatever. So changing room, this is where the interview will happen, where they fill out the screening form. And then you also have, this is an outpatient side, but then you have an inpatient side for zone 2. So usually we'll have an area where the bed will be stored, the inpatient beds that have the ferromagnetic oxygen tank, the ferromagnetic EKG leads, all those things, they'll be stored here in zone 2 so they don't by accident get into zone 3. In between zone 2 and zone 3, this is where the biggest screening will happen. So we need to screen the patient. We need to interview them. We need to look at their screening form. We need to use the metal detector. It could be one of those halo door devices that they walk through and you can hear the beep. It could be a handheld device. There are all different types of ferromagnetic detection devices. So every department's a little different. So you'll see how every department kind of does this as you go to all the different sites within the Emory system. And then we need to secure patient access. So only the patient that's being scanned should come back. If a family member is to accompany them, do we screen them also? What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's nodding, yeah. Do you think we need to screen them as thoroughly as the patient?
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, you do. The screening form's not as long, but it is as thorough. Like it hits on the major things, but it doesn't really go into all the different devices. But if you've had like some major surgery, it will be caught on the guest screening form also. You'll see that here in a little bit. And then you have in zone 3, this is typically the control area where the technologist is actually at the console scanning. You have, your computer console, you have your power injector for your contrast. This is where we're going to be mostly staying and being contained to while the patient's being scanned. So you have IVs being started there. Sometimes you do have another toilet where they can go to the bathroom if they need to. But the control room is the main part of zone 3. This is where the technologist is going to be scanning on the computer. And then zone 4, the most hazardous in terms of exposure to the magnetic field is zone 4. This is where the actual scan is going to take place, where you have the machine. All right, so these are the signs you might see. You'll have different colors. You'll see zone 1. But zone 1, quick and simple, it's basically all areas freely acceptable to the general public. All personnel are permitted. They get a little specific and say magnetic fringe fields in this area are less than 5 Gauss. We don't even need to worry about that until we get to the zone 4. So just think freely accessible, general public, all personnel permitted. Patients, family members, staff, anybody can go through zone 1. The entire world, we're basically in zone 1 right now. So you're good. Zone 2. This was that waiting room. We're filling out that screening form. They're getting changed. They're going to the bathroom. This is the interface between unregulated zone 1 and strictly controlled zone 3. So it's kind of, a little bit of just a waiting area. In zone 2, our MR patients and family members are unscreened at this point. They're filling out their screening form, but they haven't completed it and they haven't had it checked by a MR safety officer or a MR technologist. So zone 2, still unscreened. Zone 2 is where you might find this signage. So you might start to slowly see these danger, danger, crazy, stop. They might have these like Western saloon bar doors where you need to go through. So you're going to have all this signage to really slow somebody down. Go, oh my God, like this doesn't look safe for me to randomly walk into. And that's really what it's for, is to prevent just random traffic from the hospital going back into zone 3. So you'll see these signs between zone 2 and zone 3. All personnel are permitted, however, there should be an MR trained gatekeeper to keep patients, non-MRI personnel, from inadvertently wandering into zone 3. You won't find many patients inadvertently wander into zone 3. You know who you'll find is random staff members sometimes. You'll find a nurse that has some medication. They go, oh, I was supposed to bring some Ativan down for patient so-and-so. And they'll like walk right through to zone 3, and you go, whoa, hold up. You're starting to get into a hazardous environment. I need to screen you before you can come into this zone, or just give me the medication and I'll give that to the patient. So you'll actually find more of the ancillary staff wandering into the zone 3 before you'll find like a family member that somehow slipped through all the cracks to get back there. But you need to keep your eye out for just random people coming into the department, because these signs don't always scare off most people. Then you have zone 3. All patients and personnel are screened in zone 3. So even if you have a radiologist that's doing the biopsy, they need to be screened also. They only have to fill out one screening form, but if they do have an update to the medical record, you need to know about that. So usually like a doctor that you see all the time, you don't need to screen him every time, but you need to do the initial screening. And if you're an MR tech that's new and you have a doctor that you've never met, even if they've come back a million times, you still need to go, well, hold up. Do you have a screening form on file? It might look embarrassing at the moment, but you don't know that. So you can't just go off of their word like, oh, I've been back here 100 times. I don't need to do that. Why are you slowing me up? I got this biopsy. Get out of my way. You're the gatekeeper. Remember that. Don't let the hierarchy intimidate you, okay? So it is your environment. You are in control. So I want to see some smiles on your face. It is your environment. I want you guys to like regulate. All right?
Quick question. So if we're in a site and we're there and that person has been screened by, like, say somebody before us and we're like the new tech there, is their screening okay if they have done the form with that other person? If we don't know who that person was, like say we didn't meet them before they left or whatever?
Yeah, good question. So if they have that screening form somewhere on file, they usually keep them in the department of like who the major staff that come into the area. Just go, hold on, before you go in there, can I just make sure your screening form is filled out and up to date? You can stop them that way. Or if you don't have time and for some reason you can't locate that screening form, go through a verbal checklist. And I'll give you guys a run through of what a verbal checklist does to quickly rule out any major devices. Because if it's like a doctor that obviously is like healthy and he works in a hospital, or she's healthy and works in a hospital, you can just go through a quick verbal rundown of a screening form. You ever had any major brain surgery, aneurysm clips? Ever had any heart surgery, pacemakers? Ever have any injuries to the eye that involve metal? Boom, boom, boom. I knocked them all out. Verbal screening form, you're good to go. Okay? Good question, though, because you do need to have that check, because you can't let anybody in Shamarva that you don't know. And that's why you'll find a lot of techs are really weird about that. And that is just because they've had experience where something crazy like that has gone on, and they know that they're ultimately responsible. So if you find some MR techs are a little edgy about MR safety, that's the reason, because they don't trust anybody, and rightfully so. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust your patient. Don't trust those MDs. Make sure they write it down and you get some kind of documentation or at least a verbal checklist. So good question. So zone 3, we're screened. This is our control area, and you can see here the technologists sitting at their control area. We got 2 scan rooms, and that can happen. We have tight spaces, so you might be back to back to another scan going on by another technologist at the same time. And then zone 4, you are finally in that MRI suite. You have the static magnetic field, which is very strong. It's measured in Tesla within the bore of the magnet. But as you expand out from the magnet, it's measured in Gauss. That's where that 5 Gauss line kind of came into play, because it's measured here in Tesla in the middle. And then as it expands out and the magnetic field strength goes down, it's measured in Gauss. So surrounding the magnet, measured in Gauss. inside the magnet measured in Tesla. And 1 Tesla equals 10,000 Gauss. 1 Tesla equals 10,000 Gauss. All right. Let's move on to the personnel within an MRI department. First, we have non-MR personnel. These are basically patients or family members. They have essentially no training at all. They've never watched an MR safety video. They've never gone to a lecture by an MRI technologist or MR safety officer. They are completely new to the MRI environment, and they are the most dangerous because they have no training whatsoever. Level 1, this is minimal MR safety education. So these are typically like the front desk staff, people that are going to help change the patient, maybe a EMT or a tech assistant. Not many of those jobs still exist in the MRI department, but you might have somebody that is not an MR technologist that works in your department that still needs a minimal level of MR safety education. So usually it's like 1 video they need to watch per year. They check it off. Obviously, it's never usually enough, but they never go into zone 4. So we never need to worry about them bringing into a patient into zone 4. That would be outside of their job description. But that's usually front desk staff, administration type people. Level 2, that is us, the radiologists, the radiology RNs, the people in the MRI department that have an extensive training in education in MRI safety. So after this unit, which level do you think you're going to be? I hope. Level 2. I see some fingers. Level 2. So everybody is going to be at this stage, and I will actually, this is a requirement by the ARRT. I will check this off after we complete our MRI safety lecture unit, okay? So everybody's going to be level 2, and you'll need continuous education. That's why you still need CE credits. That's why you need training every year about MRI safety, because you need to maintain that level 2 of personnel. All right, so we'll quickly just talk about some of the device terminology, and we'll stop there. But we have safety terminology for the different devices within the body, external to the body, active devices, and passive devices. So let me just call on somebody. Rachel, what would be an internal device that you could think of, like a quick internal device?
I guess the aneurysm clip or
Good. And where do you find most aneurysm clips?
in the brain.
Nice. They're not all located in the brain. You could have one like in the femoral artery, places like that. Major vessels where you are either clipping off an aneurysm or they coil the aneurysm. And remember from pathology, what is an aneurysm?
It's
Anybody?
like a clot that has gone off, like an area of blood that has collected into an area where it's not really supposed to be.
Okay, so I wouldn't say clot. It could potentially have a clot in there, but remember thrombus is usually the term for clot. Think outpouching. So you have a vessel and then you have an outpouching. A weakening of that vessel wall causes an outpouching, and what could be deadly about that is that burst, that outpouching burst, like an aneurysm within the aorta, a major blood vessel you could quickly bleed out and die from. Same with the brain, because you have major vessels in the brain. You have the circle of Willis, you have the anterior circle of Willis, you have the posterior circle of Willis. If one of those vessels rupture, you could actually bleed out on the table. So good example, Rachel. That is an internal device that is passive. And does anybody know or give a guess of what a difference between an active versus passive?
Would active be more like pacemaker?
Very good. Some electrical component is defined as an active device. So pacemakers, brain stimulators, spine stimulators, infusion pumps, pain pumps, insulin pumps, all those things that require some kind of battery and some kind of mechanical device that the patient can set along with their doctor to deliver medication or make sure the heart is beating at an appropriate heart rhythm that they set it to. All those things are considered active devices. So we've called out one internal, we've talked about passive and active. What do you think an external device would be?
Oh, that tank, the infusion pump or something like that.
Good, yeah. Because if you have a insulin
Mhm.
pump, sometimes you can like take that off and put it outside of zone 4. You can actually unhook it, but at the same time, Nushin, when you do that,
Mhm.
you're discontinuing their medication. So we always advise to never discontinue any medication because that's outside of our scope of practice, right? We never want to prescribe medication, but we also never want to discontinue medication. Even though it's a device that is not allowed in the environment, you need to have consult with the ordering physician or their diabetic doctor before you take that insulin pump off. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
And that goes as far as those medication patches, because a lot of those medication patches sometimes have an aluminum foil backing. So there's some for rapid heartbeat, so tachycardia, hypertension. And if you take that patch off because it's not MRI safe, it could cause their heart to speed up and actually cause them some clinical significant results, and they could actually, could be potentially fatal. So you need to always, anytime you remove a medication patch or a medication device, you always need to document it and get the consent of the ordering or prescribing doctor. Okay. So good. That is a good example of an external device, but other external devices that I'm thinking, like a leg prosthesis, like you have a fake leg. They have penile prostheses. They have cochlear implants that are external. You have dentures. I mean, you have all these different types of external devices that are not MRI safe that you need to make sure you remove or not requiring the zone 4 before you get them on the scanning table. So that's where we'll stop for today, and then we'll slowly go into the difference between these devices and the magnetic fields that the patient is going to interact with on tomorrow. So does anybody have any questions about anything? The PowerPoint, the assignments, the rest of the semester? If you have any questions, raise your hand, and if not, you guys always email me. Good. So what do you guys think? Do you guys what are you guys predicting? Do you think this is going to be overwhelming? What do you guys think? Do you think you like a class where you're meeting almost like high school almost every day? I guess you won't know until you have a couple weeks into it.
It's going to be a little challenging, but we're going to try our best, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, but
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm stressed.
so far, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm kind of a little excited because I feel like, when you said that it may stick in my head better and I may understand it better, I think that part of it might be kind of cool.
Yeah. There is some responsibility. There's a onus on you guys to make sure you're reading the chapter ahead of time. Because in the past, you might have had like a week before you get to the next unit. Make sure you read, even if you don't understand it. Just grit your teeth, bear through it, read the chapter, even if it doesn't make sense, just so you have a general, okay, I've heard that term before. Sean will clear it up, and then I can read it again. Make sure you do that, because it's amazing how much more you'll learn if you have just a general idea of what MR safe device is coming in before even I present on it. Read it before, maybe watch one of my videos beforehand. You can watch them at any time, whatever pace you guys wanted to go at. But I'll keep tabs on where you guys are, because I could always move a unit back if I need to. okay? Because I always dedicate the spring semester to registry review. And if I need to push a unit back, I can do that. And I could space out these units a little bit more, but I think we're actually meeting more in class than we would for a normal semester, because I usually add labs where we actually go to the lab and we're not in class. So we actually have more class time for you guys than I have had in the past for other semesters. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Well, it's good to see everybody. I'm
See you
so
tomorrow.
excited for this coming year. I got an awesome class. I'm glad you guys chose MRI. You're gonna really like it. You're gonna learn a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for the video. That
Yeah.
was super dope.
All
I
right.
liked it.
See you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.